You might say I was naive or too trusting, or, if you're being impolite, a sucker. I may have once been that way, but I'm not anymore. My husband Harris and I met after college graduation when we worked in neighboring buildings. We seemed to take an almost instant liking to each other. He's very good at. After about 5 or 6 dates, we had sex and enjoyed it both physically and emotionally. I was surprised when he asked me to marry him because I'd seen pictures of all his ex-girlfriends. He didn't hide his girlfriends from me, and I didn't hide my past from him either. They were all well endowed, with nice soft curves and probably a D&D cup or larger. I'm proud of my shape, but they barely fill a B cup. I also don't have nice soft curves as a result of. Welcome to the Incub SH channel. Dive into the world of human relationships, mistakes, and right decisions. Don't miss out. Subscribe and join our growing community. I have an athletic body but with a huge muscular round butt. Anyway, Harris and I got married, and my best friend Ashley Morton became my maid of honor. Ashley's husband Bill, the owner of an event planning company, was kind enough to plan our wedding for cost only. Harris seemed to really like Bill, and not just because he inexpensively arranged our wedding. We became and we stayed great friends with Ashley and Bill. Together, we were part of a friendly group of 6 couples. Harris and I agreed on many important things, not the least of which was that we would have at least 2 children, but only after 6 years of marriage. I had a regular birth control shot every 3 months, which was important because our sex life never really stopped. It was a very pleasurable 3 or more times a week, with a very satisfying orgasm for each of us. Ashley is a little older than I am, so while Harris and I had been married for about 3 years, and for about 6 with Bill, she'd given up birth control. She told me with a laugh that psychologically it made her a little more horny. I wish Bill would love me more often. At the time, Harris and I shared almost everything except toothbrushes, only our cars were different. I had a Prius and he had a Dodge Challenger. He thought my car was too prim. I thought his car was too macho. He hates prim. I hate macho. Plus, while Harris is Nebraska in our house, his car looks like a pile of garbage to me with papers and plastic. Cups and sports equipment everywhere, so when we drive somewhere together, I usually have to throw trash from the front seat to the back seat before I can get in. On that fateful Saturday in May, we were going to a local minor league baseball game, and we were supposed to meet Bill and Ashley there for some reason. I was ready before he was, which only happens 10% of the time, so I did a more complete job than usual cleaning his front seat too before I sat down. Even spraying it with cleaner, and wiping it down just before I finished wiping down. I noticed a small box under the seat with a label that said Trojan Pleasure Kit. The front label said there were 4 types of condoms, and I didn't realize there were so many, 12 in total. I opened the box and counted the 3 remaining ones. I carefully placed the box in my purse and got into my car. To make sense of the rest of my narrative, you need to know that 2 of my passions besides exercise are theater and cooking. I've been an amateur actor for most of my life and was involved in a community theater. I was in a production just 10 months before this momentous day. I also love experimenting with all sorts of spices and unusual dishes, which are usually well received. Having done some of my best acting work, I was warm and playful in my conversations with Harris on the way to the game. Despite the negative effect my discovery had on my mood, I was having a good time. I was tempted to tell Ashley about my dilemma, but then I realized I needed to handle this myself and gather more information before I made a decision on all aspects of my investigation. I probably needed to look into revenge. One of the home team's infielders wore the number 7, exactly like Hall of Fame member Mickey Mantle. I looked him up in the program. His name was Derek Voorhees. He was 23 years old. I was 26. I'm 6 feet 3 inches and 19 millions tall. I weigh 220 lb, 100 kilograms. He attended North Carolina at Chapel Hill. He played on our minor league Adele team. He led the league in home runs. I learned a technique that really helped. Derek was the one I was angry at, but I couldn't think about him when I was with Bill Ashley and another couple after dinner. I was too angry to sleep with Harris, but during sex I imagined I was with Derek. I had an orgasm when I imagined sleeping with a baseball player. Harris must have really enjoyed it because after we finished, as our bodies cooled down, he whispered, "You really outdid yourself." He was the best in the state, that much was clear. I didn't feel the need to say more than that, though. Thankfully, I was able to keep my cool and not let my anger show. I gave him a quick kiss and a hug, and then I fell asleep. I woke up a few hours later, and I was able to convince myself that I needed a good night's sleep to think about my next move. I knew I needed to get everything done quickly so I could return the condom box to Harris's car. As I pulled out the ingredients to make pancakes, my eye stopped on one of my homemade spices is a habanero-based blend that I use for Mexican dishes. I had a sudden idea that made me whistle as I made the pancakes. Harris ate 6 pancakes after breakfast, while Harris washed our cars in front of the house. I pulled out a pin and a dropper and mixed the habanero mixture with a little alcohol to liquefy it. I pricked each of the 3 packs of condoms in the box with the pin and used the dropper to carefully inject the liquid into the condoms. I didn't think the dosage would give me all the information I needed to catch Harris, but it was a good revenge. Before I went to hire a private investigator, I returned the Trojan box exactly where it had been under the passenger seat in Harris's Challenger and then tried to put it out of my mind. I work from home on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I had sex with Harris on Monday and Tuesday, and once again I had to think of a cool baseball player to legitimately have an orgasm as early as Thursday, around 1. At 1 p.m., Ashley called. "Everly, something is seriously wrong. Everything downstairs is burning so badly, I'm afraid I'm going to wreck my car if I drive. Bill is in a meeting in a neighboring town right now. Could you take me to the local clinic?" The sound she made when she said those words it was pretty scary, so I quickly grabbed the keys to my Prius and drove to her house, which was only a mile away. She walked, stumbling a bit, with an ice pack to her groin. She didn't have an explanation for the pain. Fortunately, the local clinic wasn't far away, and there was a parking space right in front of it. I helped her in, and even checked her in with her insurance card and ID from her purse. Afterwards, I asked the nurse if I could go in. It turned out that the nurse thought I was her sister since our facial features, height and hair were very similar. I walked to the door to the room, and the soundproofing wasn't that good. I heard Ashley say it started during sex at noon. I didn't go in but went out into the lobby since Bill was out of town at lunchtime, and Harris had condoms with habanero gravy. It didn't take a genius to figure out what happened, as hard as it was to believe. I couldn't think of any other rational explanation. Fortunately, I had 20 minutes before Ashley came out, still crooked-legged but with a much less contorted and sweaty face. I took a moment to regain my composure and relied on my acting skills on the way home. I asked Ashley a few brief questions in a delicate manner. "Did they tell you what it was?" "They think it was an allergic reaction to a new skincare cream I was using on my thighs and crotch." It was a lie. Ashley stammered, "How soon will you feel better?" I replied with an inward chuckle, "Probably in 2 or 3 days. You won't have to make babies for a while." I grinned, but Ashley didn't grin back. There were no doubts. They disappeared when I looked at Harris's red-hot crotch while he was in the shower. He'd excused himself from sex when I'd pretended to try to initiate it that night. "I'm sorry, Everly, but for some reason I feel like tonight. Not nauseous, just shitty." "It's okay, sweetie. Get better," I replied with obvious. I was laughing to myself after Harris fell asleep. I went to the convenience store and bought 2 condoms just like the ones he'd left in his box. I replaced them with new ones and put the old ones in a kitchen garbage bag, which I then threw away. Outside next step was to catch them red. I met with a private investigator, but when I found out how much it cost, I wasn't sure I could hide that amount of money from Harris. However, I could talk to Bill. I had to do it right the following Monday. I had to fake an orgasm for the second time in my life with Harris because I couldn't imagine sleeping with a guy playing baseball. I took Bill out to lunch on Tuesday. I was a little surprised but happy to meet. He was puzzled when I told him it was about a surprise for Ashley so she wouldn't say anything to her. I met Bill at a secluded location. He commented with a laugh on the lack of charm there. "It's a business meeting, Bill," I replied seriously. "Oh, what is it?" I needed a guarantee in writing from him, so I handed him a simple one. The page document said that in exchange for me sharing some valuable confidential information, he would keep it confidential for 45 days unless I gave him permission to share it earlier. There was a stipulation of $25. I told Bill what I had learned and that I needed his help in hiring a detective. I needed to pay him using his business account, and when it was done I would pay him back half. Bill was just picking at his food in frustration. I had more time to adjust, and I ate everything on my plate. The place didn't have coziness, but the food was good. After lunch, Bill and I went to the detective's office and signed the contract. We also gave him written permission to watch our houses from the inside and out, as well as pictures of Ashley and Harris. Over the next week, Bill and I took some fake trips out of town. I went on Tuesday and Wednesday until Thursday morning, and Bill went on Wednesday and Thursday. This meant that we wouldn't be suspected of being out of town at the same time during the days of my fictitious absence. We met with the detective on Saturday after our fake trips. Unfortunately, the news was as we expected. Ashley and Harris had sex 3 times between Wednesday evening and Thursday morning in the guest room at Bill's house. It was recorded in bright color or infrared with clear sound. Harris did use that condom. The only good thing was that they didn't scold me or Bill. They discussed it, and it seemed that Harris just needed to have it from time to time, and Ashley just needed a little more action than Bill provided. We needed to think about what to do about it. Bill and I went to the park to discuss it. As we'd already thought this might happen, we spent some time discussing it. I spoke up and said that regardless of what happens next, my friendship with Ashley is over, and my marriage to Harris is over too. I won't get involved in what you decide to do, but I also want to get my own back on both of them. I'll get my revenge with a habanero, he said, grinning despite the situation being anything but funny. But there's more. I think I want to try to save my marriage. That depends on how Ashley reacts when I tell her, Bill replied, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. But remember our contract. I've got a few more days to decide what to do, so don't hold this against Ashley until I give the go-ahead. I promise it'll take a lot less time than 45 days. Bill shook his head dejectedly. We hugged briefly, and he dejectedly withdrew that weekend. I had to fake another orgasm with Harris on Monday. I was reading the local morning paper in the morning when I saw a picture of Derek Voorhees on the front page of the sports section. He was raising his hat to the hometown baseball crowd, and the caption said he'd set a team record by hitting 3 homers in one game. Before I reveal my idea, I need to communicate 2 things to make it make sense. 1 flattering but probably provable truth, and 1 unflattering but definitely provable truth. I'm considered hot and pretty, but when I'm wronged, I'm angry and vindictive. I'm pretty angry and nasty, and I do hold a grudge. I've got half a dozen people from my past who'll back me up on that. So, on that Monday morning, I caught Bill between meetings. Bill, you can run into Ashley as soon as it's convenient for you. There are 2 conditions, though. That you let her stay in the marriage. I need to know one thing, and I need her temporary consent for the other. All right, Bill replied cautiously. I want you to get her to admit how many times over what period of time she and Harris had sex and who initiated it. I need you to get her to promise not to tell Harris what we know until I'm ready. Can you do that? I concluded, holding both of his hands and looking him in the eyes. After a long pause, he answered, Okay, I'll talk. I'll talk to her on Wednesday, and then I'll call you on your cell phone. Bill called me Wednesday night. Ashley had tearfully admitted that she'd been having an affair with Harris for over a year, usually once a week. It started with him coming up to her with the words, I love looking at your body. My head almost exploded. I was ready for revenge on scorched earth. I believed that Harris would want to save the marriage, and that I could make him do something that would rip his insides out. Of course, I had no intention of saving the marriage, but he didn't know that. If he wasn't interested in saving the marriage, I would devise another win. I didn't wait around. I threw the case, including a couple of compromising photos recorded by our private investigator, in his face the following Wednesday night. I was screaming like a banshee and calling him all sorts of names. I destroyed 2 of his memorabilia from his youth and threw his pillow and related items out of our bedroom. I then went into the guest room and closed the door. I installed a new door bar between the knob and the floor. I ignored the calls at the door and actually slept a little, thinking about how delicious my revenge would be. Harris begged and crawled for the next 3 days finally. I heard words that were music to my ears. Everly, we can get through this. I love you very much and I want you and me to have children. Please don't file for divorce. I will do anything to stay married. I growled. You say that, but you won't do it. I guarantee you're too weak and care too little for me to do. The one simple task I needed to do to give our marriage another chance. After that, I turned to walk away. He gently grabbed my hand. "Please, Everly, darling, I mean it." He pleaded, and there seemed to be real tears in his eyes. I stopped and stared at him. He knelt down. "Okay," I giggled. "Get me a night with Derek Voorhees at the local luxury hotel." I went to the hotel, then I turned and walked to the garage to get into my Prius. "You're joking, right?" "I could never do that, even if I agreed to do it. I don't have a way to do it." Here are some of his complaints. I stopped at the garage door, turned to him, and told him I'd already told him that. "You're not just a crook, you're also a liar. You said anything and you lied. Tell me where you want your divorce papers served." I then ran out at the sound of his faint shout. At this time, Ashley tried to contact me after avoiding her for a week. I took her call after she confessed how sorry she was. I told her she was only sorry she got caught. She asked how I knew everything. "We were so careful. Believe it or not, we never disrespected you." She whimpered, "I didn't disrespect you." I didn't respond to her irrational whining, but I saw no reason not to partially tell her. "I get it because you really are a dumb." I giggled. "Did I?" she asked, sounding genuinely shocked. "You did call me to drive you to the clinic with your crotch on fire. I thought the story about the skincare product allergy was bogus. I was sure of it when I was about to enter the room at the clinic and heard you tell the doctor that you had just had sex." Ashley let out a loud. I was shocked to find out that Bill wasn't there. I realized you were having an affair on the side, and it made me feel disgusted. I saw Harris with a heated crotch that same night. I hired a private investigator and the rest is history. You're so stupid. You had the nerve to ask me to take you to the clinic right after. I told him, "You, my husband, don't mess with me again. You're dead to me." I ended the call before he had a chance to respond. It was freezing in our house as we coexisted for the next few days. I refused to have lunch with Harris. I listened to his pleas for some alternatives to stay together, but I wasn't interested. When Monday night came the following week, I told him. By the end of the week, I had shown him the divorce papers, along with the draft of a lawsuit against Ashley for alienation of affection. It was just for show, a completely bogus lawsuit. Not only is it not a misdemeanor in our state, but Bill and I had an agreement that neither of us would pursue such a case. He asked where to serve him. He was really upset and cried. I didn't give him any mercy. Finally, he regained his composure and muttered, "If I agree to your proposal, it will only be for one night with Voorhees and you won't file for divorce." Of course, I lied. He'd been lying to me for over a year, so I had no reason to tell him the truth. Over the next 10 days, I asked him once a day, "Have you made a deal yet?" "I swear I'm working on it, but it's complicated." His typical response was, "You know what might help? If I showed you a nude picture of me." I grinned, but I told him it would have to be a print in a locked transparent case. He came back to me once he'd looked at it. I got myself ready and found a clear case that would just show a white color if you tried to photograph it. I asked Bill, not Harris, to take 2 nude pictures of me, front and back. I was pleased to see how Bill's eyes widened and sweat broke out on his forehead as he took the pictures. He was speechless as he looked at me while I slowly dressed. I don't know how Harris did it. Derek must like slim women. 3 days after I gave Harris the pictures, sweating profusely and in a quiet voice, he told me that he'd managed to get Derek to agree. He'll be free next Monday night. I'll get a room at the Four Seasons. Are you? You think you can sleep with Ashley for a year and I won't go through with it? I'm looking forward to the best sex of my life. You bastard. Just give me the key to the room and tell me when to meet him. After you sign this statement, I said, tossing the 1-page contract on the table. The lawyer had drawn up the contract on the kitchen table. It said that what I would do would have no effect if either of us ever filed for divorce. I didn't really have much faith in Harris setting up my date. So I searched the internet and found many articles about Derek during his time as a star on the North Carolina baseball team. I also found 2 articles mentioning his college girlfriend. She had a distinctive name, so I was able to track her down and talk to her on the phone. The only reason he and she broke up was that she didn't want the life of a baseball player's wife. It was clear that he wanted to play for at least another 15 years. His college girlfriend told me 2 interesting things about him. 1, despite being a super stud, he is modest and insecure about his sexual prowess. He also has a phobia about contracting STDs, so they both got tested every few months. He always uses condoms. which I'm not comfortable with. Surprisingly, on Monday morning, Harris delivered me a keycard for room 1725 of the Four Seasons Hotel. Derek wants to meet you at 5. I'll be there at 000 p.m. He managed to get in a quick dinner request. I told him I'd give him $140 for dinner. After Harris left, I took the rest of the day off and got a massage, pedicure, manicure, and facial. After the spa, I went straight to the Four Seasons. Up close, Derek turned out to be even more handsome and muscular than I thought he would be. He was no fool, a graduate of New York's Chapel Hill. What surprised me was that he was extremely charming and funny. Derek tried to ask about I cut in. My arrangement with Harris, I said, holding his hand and looking into his sexy azure eyes. We're not going to talk about it. Derek, you can think of it like someone gave you an expensive call girl for the night. You can do whatever you want with her, without pain. You don't even have to care if she has an orgasm or not. I said this to put him at ease and avoid any performance pressure he might have had. I'd been warned by his ex. Then I said, "So you're seeing someone?" He smiled, and it was a really big smile. "I can do it," he said, grinning. "Besides, I want you to know that condoms aren't necessary. Here's a receipt from my doctor dated last month that I got my 3-month supply of birth control. I also showed him the birth control shot I got last month and the lab report from just 2 days ago that said I'm STD-free. He smiled even wider but didn't say anything. Derek and I had a really nice conversation over dinner. I'm only 3 years older than him, so we weren't generationally different and had a lot to talk about. It felt like it was just a first date between people who wanted to be with each other. The only difference was that I took the initiative. After a light after dinner, we held hands and strolled around the hotel grounds, where the kids were playing baseball and the younger guests were playing volleyball. After a leisurely 40 to 5-minute walk, we walked right back to the front door of the hotel. "It's time to get payback from your darling call girl," I whispered in his ear and gave him a quick kiss on the lips. He seemed pleased with that suggestion. When we got to room 1725, I playfully pushed Derek onto the main couch, knelt down and pulled off his shoes and socks. I rubbed his bare skin with my fingers. Then I stood up, took off my high-heeled shoes, grabbed his hands, and lifted him to his feet. I slowly and erotically unbuttoned his shirt while making complimentary or carnal noises. I tossed his shirt aside and held out my hands, inviting him to undo the buttons of I took off my blouse, his tank top and my bra, then his pants and my skirt. When my skirt fell down, I said, "Oh, I'm not wearing panties," and then quickly pulled down his boxers, exposing him. He immediately started kissing me and undressing me. I thought we were going to take care of him first, but it was apparently his turn to be on the receiving end. He brought me to 2 screaming orgasms before moving on to the main course. It was absolutely enchanting. The intense orgasm shook my entire body, and I lost consciousness for a few seconds. I kissed him dozens of times on the lips as he laughed and said things like, "Oh my God, I'm never going to recover. And what on earth did you do to me?" I replied that he had removed my spine and that my whole body was tingling. I actually passed out from sensory overload after some intense sex. Derek said we're both too sweaty. "Let's take the covers off the bed, take a shower, and then get under the covers." "Sounds good to me." I smirked. The shower stall was ornate with many shower heads at different heights. We heated the water and then soaked. We washed each other off, although I usually don't laugh or giggle like that. But here we were, actually rinsing each other off. Derek lifted me up like I weighed nothing and pressed my back against the wall of the shower stall. It was divine. I came so hard again that I temporarily passed out. Luckily, Derek didn't, or we both. If I hadn't been so tired, I would have fallen to the tiled floor. I managed to recover a little and he wiped me off with a fluffy towel. He then picked me up again and carried me to the 4-poster bed where he snuggled up to me under the covers, completely enclosing me in his arms. It was a reality even better than my best dream. I almost never sleep past 6. By 30 in the morning, my eyes finally opened. I was in the same position as during my dreamy middle-of-the-night sex. The room was bright, and the clock next to me showed 8:37. I got up, went to the bathroom, and then came back to bed. Derek was sitting on the bed with a big grin on his face. I pressed my body against his. "I'm not done with you yet," I said, hugging him gently. "Oh, woe is me," he sighed. Derek came back shortly after I heard the shower stop running. He had a grin on his face that said, "Damn, that's great." I lay on top of DK, stroking his face and shoulders while he stroked my body. We mumbled and fell asleep again a while later. I woke up abruptly and looked at the clock, which showed 10:32, and then gave Derek a little nudge. "Wake up, Rip Van Winkle." I laughed. It was 11, the hour of reckoning. So let's get up and get moving. We both got out of bed and used the hotel-provided toothbrushes and mouthwash. "Why don't we take a quick shower?" Derek grinned. "No way." I gave him a quick kiss on the lips. Since we had no luggage to pack, we went down to the front desk at 11:01 and then went to the restaurant for breakfast. We carried on a perfectly cheerful conversation, occasionally holding hands or touching feet with each other. When we both realized that the time was approaching 1 p.m., he insisted on paying because you embarrassed me by paying for dinner. We got up to leave as we left the hotel. We hugged each other. I looked him in the eyes and said, "Last night was supposed to be just for you, but it ended up being more for me." "I'm sorry." Derek laughed heartily. "This must be some alternate universe where a fiery woman gives me the sex of my life," he said, and then apologized. He grinned, and we kissed each other quickly. Then he said, "So now you're going back to your husband as a faithful wife." That's what I told him. I smiled, and I answered his question for 2 reasons. 1, I didn't want to lie to him. 2, I didn't want to cheat on Harris. I told him I was going back to Harris because I was divorcing him. The second reason was that my time with Derek had been so great for both of us that I was afraid he would want to hook up again. I'd probably be too weak to resist, but I didn't want to cheat on Harris until the divorce was final. I wouldn't cheat on him with anyone else, except in this case, with Harris's permission, because I didn't want to stoop to Harris's level. We gave each other another passionate kiss and then I pulled away. Although I'd had many wonderful experiences with Harris, none of them had been better than with Derek. I wasn't in love with Derek, although it probably wouldn't take long to fall in love. I was really happy to see Harris embarrassed by my night with Derek. I didn't go into details, but I smiled. It was a great revenge. Over the next 2 weeks, I slept with Harris a few times while I finalized a new job in Washington, D.C., which was far from where I was at the time. I also rented an apartment in Northern Virginia for a few months. Harris was surprised and angry when I gave him the divorce papers 15 days after my night with Derek. I told him that all communications would be through my attorney and that I was leaving town this time. He ranted. Calling me a liar didn't have any effect on me. I left for D.C. an hour after he was served. He should have been pleased that I filed for divorce on the grounds of irreconcilable differences, not adultery. I only asked for a 50/50th division of assets. I had already withdrawn my 50% and sent liquid assets. The ink on my copy of the divorce decree had dried just a couple of minutes. A few months ago, I was cleaning my rented apartment in Northern Virginia on Saturday. My new job was going well, and I was planning to move to a nicer place within the next month. After my divorce was final, I dated a few times, but no one really caught my attention. They weren't interesting enough for even one night of wearing old shorts and a worn t-shirt. I was in my apartment doing some cleaning when the doorbell rang. I live in a safe neighborhood, so I opened the door without looking through the peephole. If I had looked through it, I probably wouldn't have opened it, considering how I looked at that moment. "Derek," I almost shrieked when I saw who was at the door. "Everly," he smirked. "You look gorgeous, poor boy." Must have lost his sight. I wondered if that meant he couldn't play baseball anymore. What was he doing here? I stammered, "Let me in and I'll tell you." He smirked and came in, hugging me tightly. We sat down on the couch in the living room. The answer to the question has many parts. He began with a smirk that seemed to grow wider. The first part is that I was promoted to the major leagues and traded to the Washington Nationals after signing a 5-year contract. I've got a 1-year contract and a new luxury condo less than a mile away. The second reason is that I finally tracked you down. My agent went through the court records and found that you'd filed for divorce, so I asked him to start looking for you. Fortunately, your name is fairly unique. I'd never known Ely before. If you're married and your maiden names aren't that unusual, I found you about a week before I signed my contract. I recently got back from spring training, and tomorrow is my home opener day. I have an invitation that I hope you'll take advantage of." "Why did you track me down?" I muttered. Derek laughed. "If you have to ask. You must be an incredible actress because I thought you liked it the first time we met as much as I did. Simply put, I want a relationship with you." I paused for a moment and then said, "A relationship, not a one-night stand like a sex buddy for sex." "Yes, a relationship. I was attracted to your personality as much as your looks. Given how good you look, and that you gave me the best sex of my life, the last thing I want is another one-night stand. It would ruin me for all other women in the future and probably ruin my career, as I would suffer too much for not being with you." I swallowed with difficulty. "Do you really think I look as sexy as I do today? Or was that just a careless comment to get a rise out of me?" He snickered, then looked serious but still had a smirk on his face as he said, "The answer to your question is yes, both. I think you look incredibly sexy just the way you are." I'm not quite sure what happened next. As it turned out, shortly after that statement I was lying naked on my back on my bed with the wonderful Derek, who brought me to an amazing orgasm by the end of the day. I knew what I wanted, and that Derek was the Mr. Right for me. Things happened quickly after that. I met Derek's parents and sister the day his, as you might expect, the house opened, because my place was right next to theirs. We got on really well. I moved into Derek's new house with him a week after opening day. When the season ended, we got married. Unlike his college girlfriend, I didn't mind the life of a major league player's wife. In fact, I rather liked it. When he came home from the sex was incredible. Now he's signed a second big contract with the Nationals, and I'm pregnant with our second child. Once a week I draft and then delete before sending an email to Harris and Ashley thanking them for cheating and laughing because their red-hot crotches are responsible for my red-hot love life.